Not dirty, but they well, if it is dirty, change it.
Okay, Nun Zayin.
Nun Zayin Amid Aleph.
Okay.
Nun Zayin Amid Aleph.
The heat on or?
Caveat Hashem.
It doesn't feel like it's on, so.
Yeah. Okay, we're Nun Zayin Amid Aleph.
Okay.
Fine. Konam Peres Eilu Alai, the person makes a neder that they're prohibiting this particular Peres upon themselves, like Hekdesh. So they have the din of Hekdesh because they said he has prohibited this with such specificity. He's picked out these particular Peres to say that these Peres, these fruits should be like Hekdesh. So therefore they have the din of Hekdesh, that one would be prohibited not only to get benefit from these, but also their substitutes if they were swapped for something else or they were exchanged for money. One wouldn't be allowed to get benefit from that, or from their gidulin if they were planted in the ground and then there were new growths that were created that sprouted up based on the original fruit that he had prohibited upon themselves. Those new growths would also be prohibited to him as well. So konam peres eilu alai, it would be one form of lashon that would bring that about. Konam hein al pi, where he says these particular fruits may not come into my mouth. If they did, they'll be like hekdesh. Konam hein lipi, where I'm prohibiting them to my mouth. Also b'chilufei megidulen. So then even that which is bartered for them or grows from them would be prohibited. He also didn't restrict he didn't restrict his neder to that which he's going to eat. So therefore, even if it would be, let's say, some money he gets from them, he couldn't get benefit from them. That's the way Tosfos explains. But if he does restrict it and he just says, it doesn't, the way that the Ran focuses on the next lashon is that he's not specifically picking out a particular group of fruit, but he's just saying, I'm not going to eat from this like this type of fruit. I'm not going to eat figs. I'm not going to eat dates. So, and the way Tosfos puts it is that since he's focusing on that, he's not going to eat it. So then in such a case, he would be permitted to eat or derive benefit from what grows from it or what is exchanged for it. But this is only b'darash zaro kala. Now, in this particular instance, the fact that he would be allowed to get benefit from that which grows from it would only be with respect to a type of a fruit or plant where the seed would decompose when it's producing a new plant. So that's b'davar shezaro kala. But if it's a root vegetable type of thing, like onion or scallions or beets, where the seed does not decompose, but the seed remains intact, that's what we call a b'davar she'ein zaro kala, afilu gidulin asurin. So then, no matter what grows from it, it's going to be prohibited forever because of the fact that it's all considered to be a hemshech. It's all considered to be a continuation of the original fruit that he had prohibited upon themselves. It's both the bein bereisha, bein b'seifa. Even in the first case, he would only be prohibited where he says peros eilu alai. He's only prohibited in the first set of fruit that's produced from it. If it's a davar shezaro kala, if it's a davar she'ein zaro kala. So both in the first case and the second case, any future fruit that comes from these seeds is just considered to be a continuation of the original seed. Similarly, somebody who says to his wife, they get into a marital spat, and he says, fortunately, people don't know how to use lashon nedarim nowadays. Otherwise, people would be in a lot of trouble. So a person says, "Kona ma'aseh yadayach alai," anything that you produce is going to be prohibited to me. Konam heim alpi. That or it's going to be prohibited to my mouth. Konam heim alpi, it's going to be prohibited to my mouth. So here he's speaking about a specific ma'aseh yadayim, specific things that she's going to be doing. So says the Ran, that's also considered to be specifying, because he's saying, oh, whatever specific things that you're going to be working on, like you're going to be baking bread and so forth. So any of the efforts from your baking of bread is going to be prohibited to me. So even if the bread gets sold, he couldn't derive benefit from whatever cost that corresponds to the effort, the grinding and the kneading that went in and the baking that went into it. So he'd be prohibited from, let's say, eating whatever bread she produces, and also the exchange of value, or if it gets exchanged for money, that would, as Haran says, corresponds to the amount of effort that she put into it, the flour that he bought. So whatever money corresponds to that, he would be able to get benefit from. But if he says shani ochel, only with respect to what I eat, so then, okay, if it's exchanged for money, he could get benefit from the money. He's not eating the money. Shani ochel, shani toim, so mutter b'chilufen, and also he'd be mutter, he'd be allowed to eat the begidulen, anything which grows from it, if it's the type of food where the seed decomposes about in the ground. But if it's something which has a regenerative bulb or root, like the root vegetables, so then anything that grows from it, even future growths that are secondary or tertiary growths would also be prohibited. He says anything that you make, I'm not going to eat up until Pesach time. Any clothing that you're going to sew, I'm not going to wear up until Pesach. So fine. So Pesach comes and Pesach goes. So Pesach, if she made it before Pesach, mutter anything that she makes before Pesach, whether it's food or whether it's clothing, he would be allowed to eat and to gird himself with after Pesach is over. But if he uses a slightly different lashon, he says that anything that you make up until Pesach, I'm not going to eat. It sounds like I'm never going to eat it if you made it before Pesach. Anything which any clothing that you produce up until Pesach, I'm not going to wear. So then, Pesach, if she made any of these things, whether it's food or clothing before Pesach, he's never allowed to eat or wear it. Also, Pesach. You're not allowed to get hana until Pesach time. Im holeches at lebeis avich arechog. If you're going to go to your father's house, and he goes even beyond Pesach, he says that you're even up until Sukkot, which is after Pesach. If you're going to go to your father's house up until Sukkot, you're not allowed to get benefit from me up until Pesach. So Pesach, if she went before Pesach, so then asur b'hanaso out of Pesach. The only time period in which he prohibited her from receiving hana is up until Pesach. So no problem. So then she already went before Pesach. She can't get hana until Pesach. But after Pesach, she can get she would be allowed to get hana. But let's say that she did not go up until Pesach, and now she's getting hana. So then, is she allowed to go up until Sukkot? The answer is no, because it'll turn out retroactively. If she goes until Sukkot, she wasn't allowed to have hana before Pesach, and she already had hana before Pesach. So the achava Pesach, that's the next clause over here. Achava Pesach below yachel devaro. So if she goes after Pesach, so then she's going to violate the bal yachel devaro if she received hana before Pesach, and now she goes after Pesach. So it turns out she had no right to get hana before Pesach. So that results in bal yachel devaro. What exactly is the nature of the Yisr, malchus, not malchus, whatever? That's all discussed earlier on in the Masechta. You can go back to Daf Tesvav if you want the details.
Okay. Well, so do you, right?
Right. You can't get hana. If he says to her, you can't get hana up until Sukkot. If you go to your father's house before Pesach, so then it's pretty straightforward. If she went to her father's house before Pesach, then she's not allowed to receive hana all the way up until Sukkot, okay, which is well after Pesach, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But she, okay, I'm sorry. She would be allowed. Anything I can clarify for you?
What was the last couple of lines about?
It's about where he takes her husband says, I'm I'm not going to allow you, my wife, to get hana from me, okay, up until a certain point in time, if you go to your father's house, okay,
Okay.
prior
Oh,
to
I
a certain
see.
point in time. So, and
Oh, we had that before.
we did have it before. Very good. We had it in Daf Tesvav. Right, exactly. We quoted this one. We brought different machlokas samaroim how to understand it. Muteris leilech achar Pesach. But in this particular case, where he simply said to her that the only prohibited time for you to go to your father's house is until Pesach. So after Pesach passes, she can go to her father's house, and it's not going to impact at all on her ability to receive hana from her husband up until Sukkot. Okay, Gemara says, Omer liishto konam aseh yadayach alai konam hein al pi konam levein lefi v'chulei. So he said that if he picks out particular fruit, then he says it's going to be prohibited to me like hekdesh. So that fruit is prohibited, and also any exchange for that fruit and any growths from that fruit are going to be prohibited as well. So Yishmael ish Kfar Yama. So there was a question that was asked by a fellow named Yishmael. Yishmael from Kfar Yama, that this was a village that apparently was adjacent to the sea. So that's why he was called Yishmael, the man of the village of the sea, Ish Kfar Yama. Amilah Ish Kfar Diyama, and have some of a different formulation, the Kfar of the sea, Diyama, Hela Biyadom. So he brought the following question. He brought the following question to the base medrash to be posed to the rabbis. But so if you have an onion, she'aku b'shvius, the onion was uprooted during the Shemitah year, and then you benato b'shminis, and now the Shemitah onion you plant in the ground, you plant the onion bulb in the ground during the 8th year. That's like this year, we're in the 8th year, right? Which is the first year of the next Shemitah cycle. So now whatever grows during the 8th year is going to be perfectly permissible. It's not going to have Kedusha Shvius, but whatever grew during the 7th year is prohibited. So now let's say that the permissible part becomes more abundant than the prohibited part, the part that grows during the Shemitah, during the new Shemitah, well, not a Shemitah year, but during the new Shemitah cycle, during the first year of the new Shemitah cycle, becomes more abundant. So this is what happened, and here's the question. The question is, Gidula of Heter, what grew during year 8 is permissible, Bikaro Aser, but what grew during the 7th year, the onion bulb, was prohibited. Do we say, Kiven Darabu Gidula Meikaro, since the permissible part is now more abundant than the prohibited part, Osan Gidula Heter, Malin is the Isser, do we say that they now, Amibatil, they nullify the prohibited part, or do we say, no, what was prohibited remains prohibited? Maybe all of it is prohibited. So also the Kamei de Rabbi Yami. So they brought the question in front of Rabbi Yami. He didn't have the answer. Also the Kamei de Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. So Yitzchak Nafcha thought he had a resolution. So he brought a raya. Pashat le min hada de Amar Rabbi Chanina Trisa Rabbi Yanai. He brought a raya from that which Rabbi Chanina Trisa said, the name of Rabbi Yanai. Batzal shel truma, he said, I have an analogous case. Let's say that I had a batzal, an onion, which was of truma, which is going to be prohibited to everybody else other than Kohanim. Shinato, and now you planted it in the ground. Barabu gidula alikaro, and now the part that grew afterwards, that's not going to be truma. It's going to be tevel. It's going to be tevel, but still tevel, even tevel. You can feed like to animals. You can eat bikrai. There are certain permissible uses of tevel, right? Barabu gidula balikaro mutter. It's going to be permissible to a non-kohen because of the fact that the permissible part now has overridden, superseded the prohibited part. So Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah, Ritema Rabbi Zreika. So Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Zreika said, but this raya, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka, is not such a good raya, because he found one shita, this Rabbi Chanina Trisa, but really there are two shitos of two other people that say exactly the opposite. So Shavik Mar train, you got off the train too early. No, you ignored what two people said. And instead you followed what only one person said. Maninu train. Who are these train? Who are these two people? So Amar Rabbi Yavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So number one is Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, according to the tradition of Rabbi Yavo, there were two different versions. We'll see of what Rabbi Yochanan Shita really was. But according to Rabbi Yavo's tradition of Rabbi Yochanan, there is no overriding. Because if I had, for example, I had a twig from a fruit tree, that was within its first 3 years. That's what I call a yolda, a sapling that's within its first 3 years, and it has some fruit that's growing on it. But I grafted, shesipcha, I grafted onto bisikena, onto an older tree that's past its 3 years, so it's no longer subject to orla. All the fruit of the zikena are permitted. The fruit of the yolada would be prohibited as a result of orla, but the younger tree that would be prohibited, that plant or that branch got grafted on to the older tree, uva peiros, but the younger tree already had peiros that were prohibited. So sipa masayim, even though after it got grafted onto the older tree, it grew 200 times fold. Sometimes masayim sounds like 1 out of 200. No, it grew 200 times fold. And we know that the shear of bittul when it comes to orla is 200 to 1. So now it grew another 200 times worth of fruit. So does that nullify the little bit that had been there beforehand? We say, usher, no, nothing doing. It's all usher. It's all considered to be a hemshek. So we see here that the new growths do not nullify the old growths. So that goes against the shita that was quoted by Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka from Rabbi Chanina Trisa. So that's shita number 1 that goes against his raya, that goes against what he says. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Nachmani, Rabbi Yonasan. And then we have another a tradition from Rabbi Yonasan that says along similar lines. And what is that? We say that batzel shinato bekerem. Let's say I had an onion which I planted inside of a vineyard, so it would be prohibited based on kilei akerem. That's what we call kilayim, kilei akerem, benakar akerem. And now the vineyard is no longer. They took away all of the vines. They uprooted all of the vines, and now there are more growths of this onion that are growing beheter. So do we say that the new growths are going to override, or they're going to nullify the old prohibited growths? Do we say that? Usher. So we say, no, it's going to be prohibited. It's not going to be overridden. So I have 2 different traditions, 2 different statements that, and this is afilu hosif masayim. You have to add the same words. Even the same shira bittul of 1 and 200 applies to kilei akerim. So even though it grew 200 times more, it's still going to be prohibited. So Hadar also l'kamei to Rabbi Ami. So then afterwards they came in front of Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami said, "Oh, it's okay. I have another tradition that we can combine together with Rabbi Yochanina Trisa's tradition, and then it also has a different version of Rabbi Yochanan. So therefore, we're now going to have 2 against 1 as opposed to 2 against 2. So also the coming to Rabbi Ami, Pashit Lemin Hada, he said, I can prove to you that the new growths that are growing in a permissible fashion would nullify the prohibited growths from the following tradition of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak, here instead of Rabbi Yovo, we have Rabbi Yitzchak who quoted a different version of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yochanan. So if I have this version of Rabbi Yochanan, the only one then who's going to be the opposing shita will be Rabbi Yonasan, because I'll have Rabbi Yochanan on the one hand, and I'll have Rabbi Chanina Trisa in the name of Rabbi Yanai in the other hand. So Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yochanan, litra bitzalim. If I had litra is a certain measurement, okay, it's a large, measurement, certain measurement of onions. So I have some litra of a bitzalim, a shetikna vizara that I was misakin. What does it mean? I was misakin it. Means I took trumus u'maisros. I took the trumus u'maisros, as the Ran says, and then planted it in the ground. Okay, because there are a lot of onions, so we call it planting because you're planting a lot of bulbs of onions in the ground. Misaseres lefikula. I say I ignore the fact that there were earlier trumus u'maisros that were taken from the part that was planted in the ground, and now when everything grows from it, so I take the entirety of all of the growth, and I say I need to take trumus u'maisros on all of it. Why the little bit that had grown before and already had trumus u'maisros that were taken? So we say no. Obviously, the gidulin, the new part, is going to nullify the old part, therefore, Alma Osan Gidulin. So it seems like the new part that grew is mevatlin ikar, is mevatel the old part. So we say no. That this case is not a proof that we really have bittul. The fact that we're requiring trumos u'maisros for the whole thing is dilma the chumra shining. It's just a chumrah that it could be that really I only look at the part And in reality, the Gidulin would not be mibatil the original amount that had been planted, but I'm going to require trumos and maestros with respect to the whole thing as a matter of chumrah. And in reality, what the din really was is that everything is an extension of the yikr. Since the yikr was pater mitrumos and maestros, the continuation, what grew afterwards, really is also pater. And therefore they're all on the same level of chiyuv, which is the kasha you were going to ask, and it's the kasha that the Ran asks. And he says that in reality, the whole thing really should have been pater. However, we're going to require tumas and maisa. So you can't bring a raya from that case. The next case that we're going to bring goes on for a long time, so therefore we'll leave that until tomorrow. Okay. I apologize for that, but it doesn't make sense.